Hello, YouTube Collective, and welcome back to watching me and supporting me. I think I may have some new people subscribing, so welcome. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching me and supporting me as I embark on sort of this lifelong dream of mine in becoming an astrologer and teaching about astrology and sharing little bits of information that I'm finding and understanding about astrology and my perspectives on astrology and how it is shaping our individual lives, how it's shaping the collective. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you and give you a very, very warm welcome. So today's video is a little bit different as I am going to be just sort of giving a forecast for the month of August. I know usually I hop on here and I talk about the moon cycles, and trust me, I will continue to do that as I think it is just such an important thing to track just in our world, in our just throughout the atmosphere. You know, I think the moon really does affect us greatly. And, you know, I think we can learn a lot from just the patterns of the moon and the cycles of the moon. And I am, I guess, one of those woo-woo people who believe that, you know, it kind of does shape sort of behaviors we may see within ourselves, behaviors in the collective, and it just reveals different things about what is going on in the energies at hand. So I love sharing about moon cycles. And if you ever want to comment about the moon, and just things that you notice throughout the different moon cycles, it's that Cancerian energy, and I absolutely love it and would love to hear about it. So today, though, I am going to share about August and the astrology for August. August, friends, as you probably saw on the what is it, the cover that I posted, will be a fated month. Okay, we are entering in the eclipse portal, excuse me, somewhere around the 5th or 6th of August. And woo, you know, eclipse seasons for me are a bit interesting, you know, as we watch the heavens, the ethers, however you see it, roll out things in our lives that are fated, that are destined, things that we perhaps are a little, you know, shaken by or shocked by. And so, you know, eclipse seasons are always an interesting time. But before I get into that, I actually wanted to kind of go back over and ask, you know, the collective about this full moon in Aquarius that we are now past, beyond it, thankfully. And just as a wrap up, you know, I had a couple questions that I wanted to pose to the collective of YouTube here. One of the questions, as I mentioned in my full moon in Aquarius video, you know, what did you see and what was illuminated for you? I definitely know, you know, I saw a lot and witnessed a lot just in my own little day-to-day life and throughout an organization I work for. And so it was just a very, very intense full moon. Maybe, you know, I noticed this for myself. Maybe you were able to finally give up something, you know, maybe it was something that, you know, with this full moon conjunct Pluto, it was something that may have had you feel like you were trapped, or, you know, maybe had you feel like you were caught up in sort of this addictive cycle. Maybe you were able to just, you know, clearly see it for what it truly was. I definitely feel like this full moon had a lot of potent energies around it that really struck, hard on these areas and illuminated things for us. And Pluto being there, I think, just only intensified it. So maybe you celebrated a victory and finally harvesting like this new discipline structure that you have been striving for. That always feels good, when you feel like, wow, like it's finally working, whatever it may be. Maybe you're trying to get structure with your finances or your budget, or you're trying to get structure around a routine or what have you. But, maybe you're celebrating a milestone or something like that in that area. Or I guess, like on a sadder note, maybe something had to leave your life and you are on a healing path right now. And for whatever this full moon ushered in for us, this past full moon, I think, friends, we have the third quarter of this cycle, which will happen around Wednesday. And, it may trigger a little bit more of the energy from this time. But I think ultimately we will be able to release whatever came, whatever was illuminated, whatever had to leave our life, and and really move on towards the next cycle. And so that's what I am here to share today. I make note cards. If you're new to my videos, I look down a lot because I want to try to keep myself on track, and I'm a chatterbox. So if I don't keep myself on track, I will just start chatting about God knows what. But yeah, so I'm on here today because I want to talk about, we're wrapping up July, what we are seeing for the month of August. What are some of the astrological energies that are going to be ushering in? And I think I'm going to start doing this perhaps at the end of the months, because it's giving me an opportunity to kind of get ahead of the game and sort of see what's coming, and possibly even pick which videos, aside from just the new moon and the full moon that I pop on here to share about, but pick maybe a couple other transits that are going to be happening that I think are noteworthy to talk about, to explore, to educate the collective on, and just to share on how I am seeing this time from my own journey and my own individual perspective. So sit back and listen to some of these dates or some of the things I wrote down. I did add a couple of things in there just to share about these times, and the astrological calendar I have here beside me. So the question, what does the astrology energy look like for August? Well, sort of like on the front there, when you clicked on the video, you saw the front page said, it will be faded. And I, going into eclipse seasons, I think are some of the most intense energies. Our last eclipse time, if you can remember, or I'll try to remind you here, started back in February. So at the beginning of the year, we had our eclipse portal sort of opening around that new moon in Aquarius. We had an annular solar eclipse in Aquarius, and then we had I want to say it may have, oh no, it actually was a total or lunar eclipse, excuse me, in Virgo. So, and that sort of kicked off last eclipse season. That annular solar eclipse in Aquarius was in February, and then wrapping up, we had that lunar total solar eclipse in Virgo in March, the beginning of March. And so thus ended off with that eclipse season, and now we're back at it, friends. We are back in another eclipse season that is heating up here and is gonna get us kicking off for August. And so, yeah, I wanted to just hop on here and talk about some of the transits that's going to be happening around this eclipse season, and sort of just share when I'll pop back on to talk about, of course, I'll pop back on to talk about the solar eclipse total solar eclipse that's going to be happening and the partial lunar eclipse that's going to be happening this month. But without further ado, let's get into some of the dates and things that's going to be happening, okay? August 3rd will show us Chiron, or as you know, it's also known as the wounded healer, will start its annual retrograde period. So if you uh, follow Chiron at all, I think Chiron is a really cool energy to work with in astrology. Your very own person here, native here, is going through my Chiron return. And so I've learned quite a bit about uh, Chiron is not a planet. It's more of like a point or like an asteroid or something like that, I think, in astrology, where, you know, it goes into talking about a centaur that was wounded and basically had to live with this wound because he was, uh, well, what is it, immortal or something like that. But anyhow, it is a very great energy to work with. And the sign that Chiron is in when you were born tells you a lot around sort of what wound you are here to heal this lifetime. So Chiron is going to be going retrograde on the 3rd of August. So to kick us off for August, the very first thing that's going to be happening, Chiron actually have been in Aries since 2018. And now it dipped into Taurus for the first time in a really long time. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it usually Chiron takes a while to get around the whole zodiac. It spends quite a bit of time going through each sign. And I think Aries and Pisces, it spends a lot, most of its time, or longer lengths of time. And so it's been in Aries since 2018, I want to say. And so if you want to know a little bit about how you've been healing or what's been bringing to the surface or activating healing in your life, then you can kind of look at that Chiron, that Aries house in your natal chart to find out a little bit about perhaps what Chiron is helping you to heal. It's in Taurus right now, but it's going to retrograde and it's going to go back into Aries for its finale, you know, that final little, you know, all right, you know, you can graduate, I guess, and move forth into the next area of your life to heal. But it's going to go back to that 26th degree of Aries, and it's going to be so those final degrees there in Aries, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then it'll move back into Taurus around January 2027, where it will stay until, drum roll please, 2033 or 2034, somewhere around that time. So as I mentioned, it takes a while to get through the signs. And so, you know, what I want to share about this is, you know, if you're like me, I really, especially when I learn about something new, I want to try to find out where in my life am I seeing this, you know, show itself, and where am I engaging with this, or where am I not engaging with this and should be engaging with this. And so, you know, early April and forward, so, you know, starting back from early April, Chiron was at the degree that it is going to go back into retrograde before it moves completely out of Aries. So that's that 26th degree. And, you know, it's going to move forward back from that degree. And so if you have anything around that 26 degree or 27, 28 degree, even 29 degree of Aries, you know, or maybe cardinal energy, you are learning a little bit about what you are healing, what you've been working on around this time, you know, whether that it has been your finances, or I think, you know, with Aries energy, it's probably talking a lot about the self, you know. Maybe that's rather your health, you know, or your identity, or, you know, Aries is ruled by the planet of Mars. So, you know, I know for myself, one of the things that I've realize or understood a little bit more is what is worth action and what isn't, and how to heal that. Because sometimes I think, um, when you come up at a time or you come up in a generation where everything is no is worthy of helping or handling or taking action towards, and now you sort of get to sit with yourself and think about, not what is worth, what do I need to show up for in my life, what do I need to be a leader of, or take charge of. And if I show up for everything, how does this affect my health? I mean, there's just so many things that you can gain from this time, and probably have gained from Chiron being in Aries. So take advantage of this retrograde period. As you can tell, I already have and probably will be. So next, let's move on to the next transit for the month. On August 6th, Mercury's shadow period remember how Mercury has been in, yeah, it's still there. Okay. Mercury's been in the sign of Cancer since June 1st. Okay. And so it retrograded, of course, and then it started going back forward again. And so it will finally be out of that shadow period, friends, on August 6th, where, it's almost over and done with the sign of Cancer. And, obviously, there have been lots of reflection in that area of our life, in that Cancerian area. I think it tied a lot into, just the moon lunations and things we've gone through. And so it will be completely out of that shadow period. So maybe we'll even feel, even more of a completion from this last moon lunation cycle. And yeah, and thus, we will start our eclipse season, as I mentioned before, around that time as well, around the 5th or the 6th of August. Also, I think, is it on that same date? I want to say it is on that same date, August 6th. Venus will also move into her air domicile of Libra, where she will be home. And that's a good thing when we have the goddess of love at home, okay, where she can have access to all the things that make her feel loved. That's always a really, really good thing. So keep an eye out for that, dealing with those relationship parts of our life, right? On the 9th of August, Mercury will finally move from the sign of Cancer, as I was mentioning, where it has been since June 1st, and will finally venture into the fiery domain of Leo. So that will happen on the 9th. It will join the sun. The sun is already in Leo, which I am loving this domicile Leo sun. The South Node will be there, where these eclipse energies are going to be activated, and Jupiter is there. So just know that's going to make for a lot of energy in that Leo house of yours, okay? And then on August 10th, the planet of Venus, okay, which has just recently gotten back home. Remember, I just said she just went into her air domicile of Libra. Will oppose, okay, the planet of Neptune, which is currently retrograding right now in Aries. So, I sort of put some little side notes in here for us, to kind of, because I probably won't pop on here and talk about all of these lunations, or transits, excuse me, although I do want to talk about a few of them. But I did put some little clips on things that, if I don't come back on here, or just my perspective, I'm sure will possibly expose why that sweet love, okay, we were hoping for back in early March, after that total lunar eclipse in Virgo, didn't work out the way we were perhaps dreaming or fantasizing that it would. Okay, so I think this, this transit in particular with Venus opposing Neptune is going to set the record straight a little bit, in terms of real love, true love, what love looks like, and, the fantasy of love, right? All right, so then on August 11th, moving along, the planet of Mars will change signs. Da, 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 da. Okay, so boots on the ground here from the sign of Gemini and start its time through the sign of Cancer. And I had a couple of thoughts about this, okay? Of course, Cancer was retrograde, or sorry, Mars was retrograde in Leo starting back, I believe it was December 2024. It went retrograde in sort of like those early degrees of Leo. And throughout a lot of those first couple of months of 2025, it was retrograde in Cancer. So then it started going direct again in Cancer and, till it was over. But I have a feeling that something nostalgic with, how things are done is going to sort of resurface or pop back up. So I want to let you know that now. I probably won't be talking about this transit in particular, making a video about it, but it definitely had me raise my eyebrow a little bit. So yeah, so it will do that. And let's see here. Yeah, so that had me kind of wondering there, on that area of our life. I don't know, maybe you can think about what was happening for you around that early part of 2025, those early months, particularly, I believe, January and February, maybe. And then, of course, it started going forward in Cancer. And I don't know if I wrote down the exact time it went back into Leo. Yeah, and so it went back into Cancer January 25 till mid-April 2025. So yeah, so we had a really long period there with Cancer, with Mars in Cancer, and that early part of 2025 of, Mars retrograde periods can really maybe show a time where there are things that's going on that are perhaps a little not visible, not as active, I should say, with Mars being an active planet. And then, of course, I'm pretty sure you people who were born with Mars in Cancer, you're about to have another time again with Mars going through your sign. And, it can be, a hard time. So, it's just one of those things where you may have to go back over some of these things or revisit, in a way, things in that area of your chart. So on the same day, August 11th, the planet of Mercury, which has recently just moved into Leo, remember, will oppose Pluto in Aquarius, which is also currently in retrograde right now. So, I think for this one, I wrote the answer to the suffering, the hope that you will, what did I write here? The hope that you will one day see true details in the shadow and will free yourself. So, I think there's this, with an opposition, when it comes to an opposition between, a planet and Pluto, I do think we are definitely having a moment of seeing the shadow. It is bringing in something illuminating something from the shadow. If you can imagine a shadow time, or just, seeing your shadow when you're in the sun, right? It's sort of, you see your maybe the frame of yourself, right? But there are many details that you can't see in a shadow. And so I think that, having this moment with Leo opposing uh Pluto, which is retrograde in Aquarius, is probably perhaps going to bring about a time where maybe we have, or we can see where we have self-sabotaged, or things dealing with that area of our chart, or even in our collective world. Aquarius talks a lot about I think just the communities and the networks that we are a part of, right? The organizations. And so, stay tuned for that. It should be an interesting time. Then on August 12th, okay, here we are at our first eclipse. There will be a new moon total eclipse in Leo at 20 degrees. Of course, I will be back on here to talk about that, as that is a lunation, and I love, spending time really just giving you guys my perspectives and thoughts around these full moons and new moons. But speaking of seeing, the shadow, or having to deal with the shadow, I think that having this new moon total eclipse, in the sign of Leo, I think at the time is going to be conjuncting the South Node, which is, if you know anything about, I guess, the nodes of fate and destiny in astrology, you know, one thing you can, I think, understand about them, depending on where it's happening or what it's highlighting for you. The South Node is more of what is in the past, is sort of what we are letting go of. The South Node can be a little bit draining, as it is an area that we are releasing, and sort of moving into that North Node, which right now the nodes have moved, as I mentioned on the last video I made, from Pisces, Virgo to now Aquarius, Leo. So, perhaps, you're feeling a little bit more drained. I know I am. I was like, what is wrong with me? And then I looked and I realized, oh, the South Node is activating for me an area where, you do feel a little bit more tired or drained, or it affects your physical health. So, just know I will be back on here to talk about that, as I think this is going to be a powerful total eclipse. Definitely faded, as I mentioned. Yeah, so let's see here. My advice for eclipses, okay? And it's changed over the years, as I think, when it comes to eclipses, it can have and mean a lot for many different people, just depending on who you are, depending on how you see eclipses, depending on your own natal chart. I was born around the time of an eclipse. And so I think, as a native who was born around the time of when eclipses were happening, I was kind of born like right when eclipses were shutting off. I think there had been a total, I can't remember, but I think it was a total solar eclipse, maybe a couple weeks before I was born. And then it, like, right a day or so after I was born, it closed out with a lunar eclipse. And so I definitely feel eclipse energies pretty strongly, and I try to track them in my chart, because I think it is a time where you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about, letting go. You can learn a lot about your destiny, your fate in astrology. And so my advice, I did have some tips here and advice. don't try to manipulate what shows up in your life during this time, or force it, or, you know, I think whatever we try to do, right, when it comes to manipulating, but try to just walk through it. Try to understand that this is a time, this, divine orchestrated energy that comes in, that's ushering in experiences that we are supposed to have in our life, to help us understand better about fate and our destinies in life. If we believe in that stuff, I certainly do. And I certainly practice it, which is why I practice astrology and talk about astrology, is really because we are destined for certain events, and there are things that we just won't be able to escape, friends. And so my encouragement is just to walk through it. There are specific lessons, tests, experiences, thoughts, behaviors, that we probably will undergo or might undergo, throughout this, you know, supernatural time that we will just have to walk through. Okay. So, moving along, on August 15th, Mercury in Leo will conjunct Jupiter in Leo. So, I love this time. In fact, it will be kicking off a new Mercury and Jupiter cycle. And so I would like to say, friends, this is like the messengers of good fortune, good doing, a great day or time to spend spreading good news. If you have something you want to work on that is dealing with the communication side, this is a wonderful time to start it. Just a good time of speaking in general, speaking if you have children, speaking to your children or children in your life, or maybe even speaking, just heighten wisdom and knowledge to the inner child of ours, right? We all have an inner child. And so sometimes even just speaking to ourselves, in a way that we want to see ourselves go in a good direction, go in a direction that is fortunate. And yeah, things that possibly that will illuminate more of our heart and our passions and, our values. So I would say this is probably one of my favorite transits of August, Mercury conjuncting Jupiter in Leo. So then on August 17th, the planet of Mars, right, which is, we just spoke about earlier, has now recently moved into Cancer, will square the planet of Neptune, which is retrograding in Aries. So, this is definitely creating this Neptune is being squared, right? Venus is squared them, now Mars is squaring them. So it's, yeah, I think when the going gets tough, right? When the going gets tough, maybe you just need to check in with your fuel to see how you are going to continue, maybe to activate a dream you had, a goal you had, or is it really just a wild fantasy? Who knows, right? But for sure, this transit probably will show us what we're really made of, in terms of that area of our charts. On August 22nd, the sun will enter Virgo, okay, where we'll all get organized, right? We'll all come together and feel like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for taking on whatever I need to get my life in order here. Say goodbye to, I guess, the disorganization of Mercury retrogrades and what have you. On August 25th, Mercury will enter its ruling domicile in exaltation of Virgo. So, and then of course they're going to have this Cazimi moment because the sun is there. I just mentioned it's going to be with Mercury here that moves in, what is that, like what did I say about that? On the 22nd, so on the 22nd, we have the sun moving into Virgo, right? And then on the 25th, Mercury moves into Virgo. And then on the 27th, they're going to have this moment where they have this cazimi, and we're going to have a partial lunar eclipse. But we'll get into that. But one of the things I thought about was with, such great energies. Okay, Mercury in Virgo is exalted, so it's sort of like this. We really can get ourselves in, I feel like, a mindset and a way of analyzing communicatively or what have you. I don't know where the Virgo area of your chart is, but I sort of see that energy as an energy of taking care of the things that we have just sort of put to the side. We have just sort of said, I'll get back to you when I'm ready. But I think, having this cazimi moment, which I love, it's one of my favorite things in astrology, when the sun and Mercury are, they call it, when Mercury goes into the soul or the heart of the sun, and they just have this moment with one another, right? Where I see it as like, your soul speaking with, or having a conversation with your mind, or your heart. And I just think it's so amazing. It's such a beautiful time. Now, we will have, which I will mention here in a minute, a time where there's going to be a full moon on that same day that they go into this cazimi. But one thing I wanted to point out about this exalted Mercury in Virgo, having a cazimi moment with the sun in Virgo. I looked back, the last time we had this was September 13th, 2025, and we didn't have one in 2024. I think Mercury, by the time it went into Virgo, because it had been retrograde, but by the time the sun went into Virgo and then Mercury went into Virgo, Mercury was trying to catch up to the sun, didn't quite catch it in 2024. And so, we didn't have that transit, which I think is a great transit. We did have it though last year around September 13th, 2025. So if you can cast yourself back to around that time, maybe what were some ways in which you were like, all right, I'm ready to, especially in that Virgo area or that Virgo house in your natal chart, I am ready to, what is it? Edit here. Okay. I'm ready to fix some things, and I see exactly how and what I need to edit out to improve something and to make it better. So I just wanted to put that in there. Now we are, we will also on that same day be having we will be having a partial lunar eclipse, full moon in Pisces at that same degree that, of course, Mercury and the sun will have had their cazimi moment. And so, full moons, as we know, can be an intense time of either, celebrating a milestone or, wrapping something up, letting go of something, releasing something that's an old pattern. So I will be back on here, of course, to talk about this lunation, but it's a little bit different because it is an eclipse, and I think there is something very fated, very destined around this particular Mercury, Mercury in Virgo, and the moon in Pisces, this lunar eclipse time. Yeah, so I'll do some research on that, friends, and definitely we can talk about this a little bit more, of those areas of our charts. As remember, we were, we just wrapped up the nodes of fate and destiny in that Pisces and Virgo axes just about, let's see, around this time it'll have been maybe about 2 months ish prior to that time. So yeah, so I definitely think there is something there that we really are saying goodbye to. We really are releasing, and that's fated. Okay, lastly, friends, we will wrap up these two powerhouse transits. Or sorry, we will wrap up with two powerhouse transits on August 28th, okay? Mercury and Virgo, speaking again about this time with Virgo energy, will be squaring off with Uranus and Gemini. So apparently they've had some things to talk about, or should I say argue about? um, so that will happen on August 28th. And then we will also have Venus in Libra opposing Saturn in Aries, which is in retrograde right now on that same exact date. So, we barely are even out of eclipse season. So, as I mentioned, there will be, eclipse seasons know how to bring the drama. Okay. So just know we will have these. I think Venus will be letting Saturn know. I think I like it my way instead. It's much better in my domain. Thank you very much, Saturn. But either way, it's definitely going to, I think, bring in some action-filled energy around relationships and a whole host of other things, right? And we will end this month with Venus starting her shadow period, because on the 31st, Venus will go shadow. Will start her shadow period in the sign of Libra, because Venus is going to go retrograde this year, friends, of all that's going on and everything, right? Dealing with relationships or what have you, Venus is going to go retrograde this year. I believe, when is Venus going retrograde? In Libra season. So in October 3rd, actually, Venus is going to start her retrograde period. And she's going to retrograde back to around this time on August 31st. So definitely pay attention to that part of your chart. As I mentioned before, I think relationships are definitely in for a wild ride this eclipse season, along with other host of letting things go and moving into the new and what have you. So that is all I wanted to share. If you like these monthly forecasts and you want me to hop on here and talk about them, I plan on doing it anyway. But if there is a particular transit that I've mentioned that you want me to maybe discuss, give some advice, or share my perspectives on, please leave me a comment and I would love to do that for you all. Otherwise, friends, I'm going to wrap up here and I will see you back where I'm going to be talking about the new moon total solar eclipse in the sign of Leo. So I will see you back here next week. All right, take care.